Hi everyone, welcome to your Fight BAC Brown Bag webinar.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to your Fight BAC Brown Bag webinar on educating consumers on the safe handling of fresh produce. This is your BFF or backfighter friend Ashley Bell speaking, and I will also be your moderator for today. We are the Partnership for Food Safety Education, and we support you with science-based health messages so that we can achieve our shared mission to end illness and death from foodborne infections in the United States. We would also like to thank our contributing partners, the Food Marketing Institute and the Produce Marketing Association, for making the produce campaign you're about to learn about today possible. A few housekeeping items. Your CE certificates, which I know everybody wants, are available on teamfoodsafety.org under the resources section. You can use your dashboard to ask any questions during the webinar, and we will take those afterwards. A survey will launch at the close of the webinar, so please take that so we can figure out other ways to serve you. And don't forget, you can always email me at ashley@fightback.org if you have any webinar or PFSC-related questions. And thank you all for joining today and for the work that you do. We have an exciting presentation up ahead where you will be learning about consumer trends related to fresh produce, attribution of foodborne illness from fresh produce, integrating safe handling into nutrition messages, and about our new creative platform for educating consumers. Today you'll be hearing from Consumer Science Specialist Linda Verrill, Manager of Food Safety and Technical Services Ashley Eisenbeiser, and Registered Dietitian Nutritionist, author, and TV personality Ellie Krieger. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Linda Verrill, a Consumer Science Specialist at the FDA Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. She is going to talk to you about consumer behavior.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much to the partnership for inviting me here today, and thank you to those listening for your interest in produce safety. My talk will take you through some of the consumer research on produce safety and touch on important produce safety behaviors to focus on for consumers. I'll start with some background on foodborne illness and the role of produce in those illnesses, and then I'll touch on some consumers' food safety attitudes and behaviors. I'll show you a little bit of data, and then finish with some recommendations for safe handling behaviors that are critical to focus on for education. And okay. We wouldn't be here today if foodborne illness wasn't an important public health issue. Foodborne pathogens cause nearly 50 million illnesses a year and close to 3,000 deaths. Mild diarrhea is probably the most common symptom of foodborne illness, but it can also cause organ failure, paralysis, physiological impairments, blindness, stillbirths, and of course death. Just 14 pathogens cause over 95% of annual illnesses and hospitalizations, and only 5 pathogens are responsible for about 90% of the health burden. Those 5 are Salmonella, Toxoplasma, Campylobacter, Listeria, and Norovirus. Now, you all have heard of these. While produce can be contaminated with any pathogen, some pathogens are more likely than others. Salmonella in produce is one of the pathogen commodity pairings in the top 10 of pairings that are responsible for more than 90% of illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths. Salmonella in produce is also among the top 5 pathogen commodity pairings responsible for outbreak-related illnesses and hospitalizations. These numbers about illnesses in general and illnesses associated with outbreaks are underestimated because only a small fraction of foodborne illness cases ever gets reported. But we know that salmonella contamination of produce is a growing problem. And it's not necessarily that the bugs are any stronger. It's because there have been changes in consumption in the last 20 years. Consumers are eating a lot more fresh produce, and the desire for fresh produce year-round has led to the need for transporting it for long distances. As more produce is sold in processed form, there's more cutting and coring in the field. And lastly, more fields of produce means that there are more agricultural fields close to animal production zones. So why is it important to focus on consumer behavior when it comes to produce safety? Well, first, most of the food that people eat is food that's prepared at home. And according to the research, a large number of foodborne illness outbreaks are attributed to foods eaten at home. It's very easy for pathogens to spread across the kitchen when precautions aren't taken. What are some other reasons it's important to focus on consumer behavior? Well, nearly a quarter of the U.S. population is considered at an increased risk for illness. If you're over age 65, under age 5, pregnant, immunocompromised, or receiving home health care, you're in that group that has an increased risk. We also need to focus on consumers because very few of them understand the risk that home food preparation entails for foodborne illness. And to make matters worse, food prepared at home is often served to the wider community. So it's clear that consumers can play a role in helping to minimize the impact of pathogens. The partnership and its supporting organizations have explicit instructions on how consumers should handle fresh produce in order to minimize the potential for cross-contamination and foodborne illness. Well, first, consumers are advised to purchase undamaged produce because damaged produce provides an entry point for pathogens into the product. They're also advised to keep produce separate from meat, poultry, and seafood, not only at home but also on the way home from the grocery store. There are instructions for storing at an appropriate temperature and instructions to wash firm-skinned produce with a vegetable brush while holding under running water. Less firm produce should be washed by rubbing or rinsing under running water. And it's recommended that consumers not wash bagged, pre-washed produce because it actually increases the risk for cross-contamination. The research on consumer behavior in the kitchen shows that there's a lot of opportunities for food safety educators. Some of the poor behavior includes refrigerators not kept below 40 degrees and very few people owning a refrigerator thermometer. A large percent of people either do not wash their hands before and during cooking, or they don't adequately wash their hands or cutting boards after coming into contact with raw meat or chicken. Furthermore, many people eat risky foods, such as pink hamburger, undercooked eggs, raw oysters, and drink raw milk. We do a food safety survey of consumers every 3 to 5 years at the FDA. We're gearing up for the next one right now, but we had some interesting results from our 2010 survey. The graph on your slide there shows that we found a large majority of consumers believe that fruits and vegetables don't have germs that can make you sick. So on the one hand, it's nice to know that consumers have so much confidence in the safety of fresh produce. But on the other hand, if they don't think produce will make them sick, they may not take precautions. On other analysis of this same data, I found a positive correlation between washing fruits and vegetables and believing that they have germs that can make you sick. And other research has found a positive correlation between just knowing about foodborne pathogens and washing hands and cutting boards. We published a paper recently from the same FDA food safety survey, focusing on reported fruit and vegetable washing behavior. The survey only asked about a few fruits and vegetables, but we found that almost 100% of respondents reported washing strawberries and tomatoes. But for cantaloupe, only about half said they wash it. And for men, there was a large decrease from 2006 to 2010 in the percent who say they wash cantaloupe. Similarly, about half of respondents reported washing bagged pre-cut lettuce. And for the lettuce, there was a large increase in the percent of women from 2006 to 2010 who report that they wash it. So this brings us to some of the research on what kinds of people have the poorest food handling behaviors. On average, the research has found that men have poorer practices than women. Caucasians, compared to all other races, have worse practices. Young adults and much older adults have worse practices, and nearly all the research shows that those with higher educations and higher incomes have worse food safety practices than their counterparts. Now, I've seen a variety of explanations for why these particular groups have poorer practices. It seems to defy intuition that lesser educated people, for example, have better practices. Some of the research says that people with higher socioeconomic status are more likely to take risks because they may have better health insurance or they're too independent-minded. Others have suggested that lower income and lower educated consumers have better behavior because they are typically the target of extension service programs and government food and nutrition services, which include food safety education programs. So, in the end, the produce safety education does hold promise for helping to mitigate the impact of microbial contamination of produce. My colleagues at the FDA, using the survey I talked about earlier, recently published a paper showing significant improvement in food handling behavior from 1988 to 2010. And I saw results from a seemingly well-conceived produce safety education experiment that showed promising results of produce safety education. A 3-month follow-up of the education showed large improvements in reported behavior. But I think the behavior that holds the most promise for getting consumers to improve on all kinds of food handling, food safety, and produce safety behaviors is a focus on hand hygiene. Many studies have found strong correlations between those who wash their hands and those who exhibit or report proper food safety practices. For my own vegetable washing paper, I struggled for a while with the title of the paper, wanting to call it "Those Who Wash, Wash," but decided that that didn't sound very good. But I believe that if people have the knowledge about the right way to handle produce and they can be motivated to be better hand washers, they're more likely to implement those produce safety behaviors that will help them avoid foodborne illness. So people need to have the information about produce safety and they need the motivation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Linda. And now we're going to do a quick poll before we move on. So the question is, the best way to reach more consumers about produce handling, in your opinion, is A, television, B, grocery stores, C, magazines, or D, medical professionals? You can answer this question on the dashboard, and I will give you guys a few moments to answer that. All right, thanks everybody for your answers. It looks like we have a tie between, pretty much a tie between television and grocery stores. So thank you for that. That's interesting. And now we can move on to Ashley Eisenweiser. She is Manager of Food Safety and Technical Services at the Food Marketing Institute, and she's going to talk to you about safe handling practices.
Thanks, Ashley.
These
for safer fruits and vegetables, check for bruising and damage, clean hands, surface, and utensils, rinsing fresh fruits and vegetables, separate from raw meat, poultry, seafood, eggs, and household chemicals, chill, and throw away will be our key focus areas for our safe handling of produce. Linda provided a background of consumer behavior when it comes to handling fresh fruits and vegetables. Now we will take a deeper dive into why fruit and vegetable handling practices are so important and the role of incorporating the 6 steps in the prevention of foodborne illness. In order to prevent foodborne illness, we must look at the foods that are commonly associated with foodborne illness. This data published from a recent CDC attribution study shows that 46% of reported foodborne illnesses from 1998 to 2008 were attributed to produce commodities. We know that a foodborne illness is considered an outbreak when 2 or more people experience a similar illness after eating a common food. Typically, a food vehicle or common food is only identified in roughly half of the identified outbreaks. Of the outbreaks from 1998 to 2008 that were reported, where food source was identified, the food categories most commonly implicated in the outbreaks were poultry, fish, beef, leafy vegetables, and pork. You will notice, I think the text is a little small, but in the other category includes other produce commodities and including fruits. Keep in mind that outbreaks and illnesses are underreported, so they're often underestimated. So the produce industry is committed to strengthening the safety of produce and implementing preventive food safety practices through collaborative efforts with supply chain partners. Produce, along with any food, can become contaminated anywhere along the supply chain, from farm to fork. Produce may become contaminated from bacteria found naturally in the soil and water where the produce grows, or after harvest, during storage and preparation. Therefore, when purchasing produce, know what is normal, what you are looking for. Ask yourself these questions. Are there any bruises? Are there any damages? Bruising and cuts or damaged portions of the produce create a more ideal environment for bacteria to grow, which makes produce more susceptible for the growth of microbes that can cause illness. Know what the normal color is. Should the produce you're purchasing be red? Should it be green? Or should it be brown? Are there any blemishes? What's the normal smell? What is rotten? When to know when it's past ripeness? How is that produce supposed to feel? Should it feel squishy? Probably not. Typically, that would indicate that the produce is on the verge of going bad. With the increase in produce consumption, consumers are trying foods that they never had before and consuming in different forms. For example, consumers are eating raw kale, where historically consumers would eat cooked kale. Pre-cut fruits and vegetables should be stored on ice or refrigerated. Like bruising, when produce is cut, it releases moisture from the product, which creates an environment that allows bacteria to multiply faster. The cutting process itself can transfer bacteria from the surface of the produce to the inner portion. Typically, there is no kill step during produce cutting, so good temperature control is the only treatment that will delay deterioration or microbial growth. Bacteria grow most rapidly in the danger zone, temperatures between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and bacteria can double in number in just a little as 20 minutes. Since contamination can occur at any point along the supply chain, washing or rinsing fresh produce prior to eating is the last opportunity that consumers have to reduce potential bacteria that are on the surface. Rinse all produce under running water, even if you plan to peel it. Scrub firm produce like melons or cucumbers with a clean brush. The surface of these produce, particularly melons, is rough and can harbor dirt in the little nooks and crannies. So when cutting, you could transfer that microbes to the inner portion of the melon. After rinsing, dry with a paper towel or clean cloth.
And we're going to interrupt with a quick poll. The question is, rinsing produce with water is enough to remove pathogens, true or false? Give you a little less time to answer this one. So please type your answers in your dashboard. All right, thank you guys for your answers. Looks like most of you think that is false. About 66 to 34, you can see the results on your screen. So thank you guys for your answers. And now we will go back to Ashley to continue her presentation.
Okay, so in addition to the produce industry, consumers play an important role in the safety of fresh fruits and vegetables. Linda noted that consumers are concerned about the risk of foodborne illness, but they're not always taking the necessary steps to prevent it. And often, consumers' perceptions of risk is not consistent with the science. Of foodborne illness outbreaks attributed to produce, 30% were associated with cross-contamination, and 40% were associated with poor personal hygiene. This is consistent with foodborne illness outbreaks as a whole, where 88% of the outbreaks are associated with improper food handling practices during preparation. This includes cross-contamination and personal hygiene. Since improper handling in the home during preparation is the leading cause of foodborne illness, it is important to protect produce from cross-contamination with raw meat, poultry, seafood, eggs, and household chemicals, as well as prevent any contact with contaminated food contact surfaces or inadequately washed hands. This includes separating produce in shopping carts by ensuring produce is put in a separate produce bag, as well as in shopping bags in the refrigerator during preparation. Keep in mind, reusable bags should be used for food only and should not be used as gym bags, toy bags, and pet bags, or anything else other than a food bag. And they should be cleaned often. Several cleaning risk assessments that have been conducted concluded that the lack of proper cleaning of food prep surfaces or cooking utensils used in the home kitchen is likely to increase cross-contamination from poultry, meats, or eggs to ready-to-eat vegetables or salads. Clean surfaces and utensils with hot water and soap, including cutting boards and knives, before and after preparing fresh fruits and vegetables to remove soil and food debris. The risk of cross-contamination increases with the increase of food debris remaining on the surface. Remember, you cannot see, smell, or taste bacteria that can cause food poisoning. So if you are unsure if a food has been contaminated, just throw it out. Hands are a major vehicle for spreading bacteria around the kitchen. Proper hand washing is one of the most important steps anyone can take to prevent additional contamination. As food safety educators, we need to ensure that consumers are not receiving incorrect messages that contradict the science. In a recent survey of food safety educators, 52.6% reported that they encourage consumers to wash bagged produce labeled ready to eat, washed, or triple washed. In this same survey, 13.9% reported encouraging consumers to rinse produce with produce washed prior to eating. These practices are incorrect and are inconsistent with FDA and the Partnership for Food Safety Education advice. So what are the correct messages? In 2007, a group of experts came together to review scientific literature and to develop guidelines for handling fresh produce. This panel concluded that packaged produce labeled wash, ready to eat, or triple wash does not need additional washing, and in fact concluded that any additional washing is not likely to enhance safety but increase the risk of cross-contamination. Chemical rinses and other treatments for washing raw produce, usually called fruit and vegetable washes, are now being sold. They're often advertised as the best way to keep fresh fruits and vegetables safe in the home. But research has shown that water is just as effective as the veggie washes, vinegar solutions, and detergents. So before eating, remember, rinse produce under running water and pat dry with a paper towel. Often, produce is consumed raw and does not have a final kill step, such as cooking for pathogens. Bacteria grow most rapidly in the danger zone. So it is important to refrigerate all cut, peeled, cooked produce within 2 hours of preparation. Consumers are the last line of defense in preventing foodborne illness and play a major role in reducing the risk of foodborne illness by following safe food handling practices.
Thank you, Ashley. And now last but certainly not least, registered dietitian, nutritionist, author, and TV personality Ellie Krieger is going to talk to you about how food safety is an essential ingredient for nutrition education.
Hi, thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much to the Partnership for Food Safety Education for inviting me here today to speak. I have learned so much just being a part of this, this presentation, so I'm thrilled about it. And although I have a cooking show and I write recipes and I write cookbooks and so on, I think many people don't realize that at my very, very heart, I'm a nutrition educator. That's what my master's degree is in. And so I feel that I am, and my mission is to really bring nutrition education to people through these means. I'm really thrilled to know that all of our efforts, I know a lot of people online are doing nutrition education as well, and I'm thrilled to know that our efforts seem to be really working, that people are truly enjoying more fresh produce. I mean, this has been something that is so important. But Ashley and Linda have really pointed out that people need to be educated on how to handle produce so they can truly reap its benefits, because really you can't reap its benefits if it makes you sick. So today I hope to encourage you to integrate safe handling messages in your nutrition outreach. The safe produce handling steps that the Partnership for Food Safety Education has developed, they're very simple and they can be very seamlessly integrated into nutrition outreach that you're probably already doing. And in fact, I really believe that safe handling messages are an essential ingredient for nutrition education, that they're not separate, but really very much an essential ingredient to integrate into nutrition education. So the equation is really simple. You can't reap the benefits of good-for-you food if it's handled in such a way that it makes you ill. So in order to have good nutrition, you really do need to look at this equation. You need to have healthy food plus food safety. and that will ultimately bear good nutrition practices for a whole life. So I really don't have to convince anyone probably of the benefits of fruits and vegetables, right, of fresh produce in our lives. It's, of course, one of the healthiest categories of foods you can possibly eat. It contains loads of health protective nutrients, vitamins A, C, folic acid, minerals, fiber, all for very few calories. From a culinary point of view, it's just, you know, loads of excitement in terms of what it brings to the plate. And I often tell people to eat the rainbow. And I tell people this with good reason, and that's because each of the colors of produce offer a different array of antioxidants. So by eating the rainbow, all of the colors, you get the full spectrum of phytonutrients. And these phytonutrients actually impart color to food. So I think taking this sort of color approach is always something that's very appealing to me. I think it really helps people connect with this idea of eating fruits and vegetables in a very, you know, sort of visceral way. People really get the color approach. But just to sort of outline here, red, like in watermelon and tomatoes, provides lycopene and anthocyanins, also strawberries, and these antioxidants actually impart the color red to those foods. Same thing with yellow-orange foods, which have carotenoids. So that's, you know, carrots, where the name carotenoid comes from, as well as mangoes and winter squash and so on. Green provides lutein, indoles, so thinking spinach, kale, broccoli. Purple and blues, those colors come from anthocyanins as well as phenolic compounds. So looking at your grapes and blueberries and purple potatoes, which I've really enjoyed cooking lately. And they're so fun to serve for kids as well. And then, of course, white. It's not in your traditional rainbow, but in the food rainbow, white is a really important color as well. One of the phytochemicals there are allicin and white vegetables, including cauliflower, mushrooms, and so on. So, again, those benefits are really profound. But if we can't connect with people on preparing these foods safely, they really can't reap those benefits. So when we encourage people to eat these wonderful foods, we not only have to tell them why, which I just briefly described why they're so good for you, we also have to teach them the hows. And that's why I love what I do with my show and books and outreach. I really literally teach people how to incorporate these foods into their lives, and I also touch on why. But the how is so critical. And a big part of that how is teaching people to handle produce safely. When we do that, we can really get the most love from our fruits and vegetables. So often, food safety is approached really as a very separate topic from basic nutrition and culinary education. And I think it is important, as Linda had mentioned, to enlighten people that they could get sick from produce because clearly they don't necessarily realize that. They could get sick from produce if they don't handle it properly. But I think very often we talk about food safety very much separately from basic nutrition education, and we talk about it in very scary, fear-inducing terms and unappetizing terms. But I think that it shouldn't be separate, and it doesn't have to be so frightening or fear-inducing. Rather, I believe that food safety content should be integral to nutritional outreach. And it's really all about helping people develop good habits. So I have a few ideas to share with you in terms of how exactly to do that. So how to incorporate safe handling practices into a number of different types of outreach. So, two types of outreach that you probably are involved with and that are my favorites are recipes and demonstrations. So first let me talk a little bit about cooking demonstrations. Because I really think there's no better way to get people excited about food and cooking and get excited about using produce and incorporating it into their lives. But really, just as important as it is during a cooking demo to show someone how to cut a floret out of a cauliflower or to chiffonade some basil, it's really important to include in your demonstration how to choose the produce? How do you know that you're going to pick a really good cauliflower or a good tomato or whatever it may be? And then also how to wash it properly, as well as how to store leftovers, and also during your cooking demonstration to show proper hand washing technique and using separate cutting boards and so on. And I think it's important to say that you don't have to go overboard. So on my show, Healthy Appetite, for example, we really made an effort to show proper hand washing. Okay, so we definitely shot scenes where we wash my hands and come back from there, or come from the refrigerator with the produce before I started to cut it, and then also showing things like separate tongs and things like that, or different cutting board colors. But there are certain constraints with different types of demos. If I showed every time I wash my hands, I think it would be the most boring TV show in the world. So I think what happens during demos and so on, especially for television, if you have that opportunity and you have a time crunch, is to make a point of showing it, but it doesn't have to be absolutely completely literal, because frankly, in most demos, nothing is really completely literal. But the point is that if you're in a supermarket doing a demo, if you're doing a demonstration, a cooking demonstration for a group in a school or wherever it may be, make sure that you touch upon these points of washing your hands, and of how to choose and cut the how to choose and wash the produce. And frankly, I've gotten so much feedback online and through my social media of people that really want to know this information, and they're watching. They tell me, oh, you didn't wash your hands before you did X, Y, and Z. One of those times that we, like I said, couldn't show every hand washing incident. But people are paying attention to this. They do want to know, and there's a big curiosity factor there, and they really want to know how to choose produce and so on. So even from the shopping end all the way through. And then while we're doing a cooking demo, I think it's important, you don't necessarily have to, you want to keep it joyful, you want to keep it keep people's appetites primed, keep their, them interested in the glory of the food. And so it's really important, I think, to keep it about deliciousness. So you don't really have to get into details or belabor the point of food poisoning possibilities and so on. But again, just simply make it a part of the how to cook properly. So then moving on to more of a recipe concept. Oh yes, but before so, I wanted to do this. We have another poll here. So I think Ashley's gonna take off on that one.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, before we move on, we just wanted to see how many of you on the call do cooking demonstrations. So your question is, do you model food safety when you do cooking demonstrations for consumers? We'll give you a few moments to answer that. Okay, thank you for your answers. It looks like most of you do not do cooking demonstrations, but for the rest of you that do, you do model food safety. So good job, and thank you on that. Thank you for those answers, and now we will go back to Ellie.
Yes, so although a good proportion of you do cooking demonstrations, so that's great. And so I think this could really help, bring that to life in a better way. In terms of recipes, when you're writing out recipes and providing recipes to people, I think it's a really great opportunity to build in messages about food safety. And so again, it doesn't have to be a separate conversation or a separate handout, although it very well can be and should be, which I'll get to later, but it can also be very much integrated into what you're doing. So if you could go to this is one of my recipes for the broccoli, celery, and radish salad that I have in my new book, which I love this salad. It's so simple and yet sort of elegant in a way. But I think the point is here is that in the method steps, you can really just put in specific directions. So in step 1, for example, before cutting the broccoli stalks or the vegetables, essentially explaining how to wash them and then dry them. And then just including the words like use a clean knife or cutting board, and so on. This can really, it's a small thing that can make a huge difference in terms of how people are preparing their food. And for me, when I'm writing, a whole book, I'm not going to write that washing instructions necessarily into every step. But I think when you're doing smaller, one recipe handouts, it's certainly something that would be appropriate. And for, more compilations of recipes, or if you're writing a book or anything, you can put food safety information in sidebars or in the beginning of the introduction to put a general information about how to wash and how to choose produce. And honestly, I think people really are, excuse the pun, but hungry for this kind of information. So you're telling them something they want to know. And then I think, again, one great opportunity is to include food safety steps right in the recipe. So another area that's near and dear to my heart is reaching kids with messages about nutrition and really getting them, I like to call it marketing. I like to market vegetables to kids. And it's really important to reach children in terms of forming good habits early on, and that relates also to food safety. Children are at a greater risk for getting a foodborne illness than adults are. So according to the CDC, every year, harmful pathogens cause serious illness for 1 in 6 Americans, and half of these illnesses occur in children under 15 years old. So this means about 24 million children every year need medical attention for a serious foodborne illness. So if you can integrate food safety information and start to develop good habits in terms of teaching children how to prepare and handle food and about hand washing, you can make a huge difference in the health of these children, not only for the immediate in terms of preventing illness, but for the long term in terms of getting them to eat and enjoy vegetables. So this slide is called Reaching Kids Vegetables 360 Degrees, and I don't mean cooking vegetables at 360 degrees, although that's very delicious. It's a perfect roasting temperature for most vegetables, in fact. But what I mean is it's a 360-degree approach to teaching children about vegetables, and that relates to a child nutrition program that I did at my daughter's public school where I started the Wellness Committee. And this is a picture of some of the Wellness Committee members and myself doing this cauliflower tasting. So just briefly, in terms of this being a 360 approach, we reached them in their classroom, we reached them through their peers, we reached them through their parents, we reached them through the cafeteria, and we wound up really making a huge difference in terms of their later deciding on their own to choose vegetables on the lunch line. So what we did was we identified when vegetables were served on the regular menu, and we kind of went back a week before that and did this 10-minute veggie bite, which was like an education program in the classroom. And just to note, we did this as one full program to really come at all angles. But really, any one of these elements would work on their own as well in terms of something you could do in a school situation or even in a store situation with kids. But the point here really is how you can take each one of these and really incorporate food safety and how just seamless it can be. So with the 10-minute veggie bite, we called it, we went into literally for 10 minutes into each classroom. And for in this case, we were highlighting cauliflower. So we brought in purple cauliflower, romesco cauliflower, white, yellow cauliflowers, and we allowed the children to touch and explore the produce with their hands. We generated a discussion about if they've eaten it before, if they like it, how they eat it, and so on. And the enthusiasm that kids displayed in talking about their experiences with cauliflower was amazing, and the interest they took in touching it and exploring it was amazing. And one thing you could do here, for example, is talk to kids about how you would choose cauliflower. How do you know it's a good one? Does it have brown spots? And then even, we didn't do this particular element of it, but you could use that opportunity to show students how to prepare the cauliflower safely, how to cut it, how to first wash their hands, and so on, and using a clean cutting board. So then the next aspect was a parent outreach, where we sent a letter home in each child's backpack explaining that we were talking about cauliflower, and we encouraged the parents to make cauliflower that week for their children. And this would be a perfect opportunity, for example, to send the handout materials, the 6 steps for safer fruits and vegetables, along to the parents with these materials, and even specifically noting safe handling of cauliflower. Again, in this instance, just happens to be cauliflower, but we did this with lots of different kinds of vegetables. Another thing we did was we got food ambassadors. So this is, children are so influenced by their peers. And so one element in terms of nutrition education that really helps is to get the peers, other students involved to help teach their peers. So we solicited volunteers to make posters promoting cauliflower in some way. And one of the things you can encourage them to do is to talk about how to safely handle it in this, and maybe make posters regarding that. And then lastly, we did, after we had done all of this, we did sort of this is, you see us preparing this vegetable tasting, and this was prior to them choosing from their lunch line. We gave them all tastes of roasted cauliflower. And so just our demonstrating good food safety for the students, and in our description of how we made the roasted cauliflower, these are all examples of how you could integrate very seamlessly these food safety messages and ultimately change habits for the long run. The 5th step was that the vegetables were served on the regular menu in the lunchroom, and if anyone wants to look back at this or use this concept for themselves in whatever outreach you're doing, it's on my website in the blog section, and it really describes it. And it was incredibly effective. We had a graduate student actually study it, and the results were amazing. Children really did choose vegetables more often after we had done the tasting. So another way to reach children is to cook with them. And several studies show the impact that that can have. And not only cook with them, but involve them in many different areas of preparation. And this is just a natural way to integrate food safety messages. So for example, when you're at the store, I would tell my daughter, you pick the vegetables for dinner. Anyone will make it. And in the process of that, let's say she picked, Brussels sprouts, I could help her learn exactly how to pick one that looks really fresh and good, that's not damaged, and so on. Then when we get home, you have this vegetable ready to be eaten. You teach your child how to store it, how to best keep that so that it's going to be still good to eat when you're ready for dinner. And then, of course, just as you're doing in cooking demonstrations, when you're cooking with your kids, I asked my daughter when she was little, she's 11 now, so she's already a pro at this, but when she was really little, I would say to her, okay, Isabella, what's the first step in cooking? And she would say, wash your hands. And so literally this is something that you can just ingrain and integrate from the very beginning as simply good habits. It is the first step in cooking is washing your hands. And so all throughout the process of choosing, storing, cooking, and cleaning up, you can teach your children how to have healthy habits when it comes to produce. So in conclusion, food safety is integral to cooking and eating well. It doesn't have to involve a scary conversation. It's simply about forming good basic habits for healthily prepared food and enjoying more produce. And happily, the partnership has really come up with these amazing materials, new creative materials to help you do that. And so with the 6 steps that Ashley was talking about, there's new creative materials downloadable on the website that describe these 6 steps to become a produce pro. And the campaign elements include a consumer fact sheet, educator talking points, safe handling graphics, retail circular, retail point of sale, retail handouts, and they're really, you know, so clearly written and very actionable. And I think it's just a perfect thing, starting point for really integrating food safety into your education. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellie. And now it's time for our question and answer session. So if you guys have questions, please type them into your dashboard, and we're going to address as many of those as possible.
Ashley's looking through your questions. Thank you for submitting so many questions. We'll get to them in 1 minute. This is Shelley Feist. I'm Executive Director of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. I want both to thank our presenters today and also to thank you, the backbiters, for your ongoing and intense interest to learn more about how you can educate consumers and about the research behind the messages. The campaign that Ellie previewed in a couple of slides is going to be launched early this summer. So I did want to tell you to stay tuned for more information. If you are on our email list, you will be the first to know about the new campaign. We also have in the post survey that you're going to receive right after the webinar closes, please respond to that, because there's some additional questions in there about your interest in possibly being part of a test, the online survey or test of the campaign. So back to Ashley with the questions that our presenters can answer for you.
Okay, I'm getting many admin questions, and you guys want to know if the presentation will be available. Yes, it will. It's already posted on teamfoodsafety.org under the resources section. And for those of you on the line, I will be sending out an email today with links to that, so you guys will be able to download and share those as you see fit. Here's one question from Suzanne. Does the temperature of water to wash produce matter? And Ashley Eisenbeiser is going to take that one.
Thanks, Suzanne, for your question. The temperature of the water does not matter. It's more the rinsing that washes off anything that may be on the surface. And for the tough or rough-skinned produce, the scrubbing action actually is the part that removes the contaminant. So no, temperature does not matter, and just choose a temperature that warm, preferably, so that you can rinse for an adequate amount of
time. Another question, you guys want to know the correct answer to the last poll question, is rinsing enough to remove the pathogens or not? And Ashley Eisenbeiser is also going to take that one.
Yes, so the correct answer is rinsing with just water is enough to remove any pathogens that may be on the surface. Research has shown that any produce rinse or any vinegar solution that you would wash your produce in is not any more effective than water. And typically these products are costly, so with that, running water is adequate.
Thank you, Ashley. We have a question for Ellie from Amanda. Amanda wants to know where on your blog she can find the kids program that you just presented about.
Yeah, you know what? I forget which. I have to go check that out exactly which entry it is. But my website's elliekrieger.com, and maybe I can look for it now and get back to you on the exact date that I posted that. So it'll just take you can continue talking, and I can answer that hopefully in a little bit.
Thanks, Ellie. We have another question. Where can I find more information about the 6 steps to safe produce? The handouts that we just talked about are not available yet. They will be launching very soon, and you can get updates if you are part of our email list, and if you're not, you can go to fightbac.org to sign up for those, and you will be the first to know when this campaign launches and is available for download.
There is information available now, though, however, on produce, under the campaign section of it. Yeah, the 6 steps, the 6 steps to save for fresh fruits and vegetables campaign of the partnership is available on the campaign portion of the website. We are refreshing that campaign, and that is what Ellie previewed. So there is information available now, and there will be a refreshing of that available early this summer.
All right, that's about all the time we have for questions, so thank you all for that. You can always email me if you have any other questions. But yeah, just to close things up, I wanted to invite you to stay in touch. As Shelley mentioned, we'll be launching a survey after this, so please take that. It'll give us a better idea of things that we can do for you to keep you guys happy. There are many, many ways you can keep in touch with us. You can follow us on social media. You can read and write for our blog. And you can always, always contact me, your backfighter friend, at ashley@fightbac.org or 202-220-0705. And also mark your calendars for our upcoming events. We are having a Knowledge Exchange conference call on July 29th at 1 p.m. And of course, mark your calendar for the Consumer Food Safety Education Conference that's happening December 4th and 5th, 2014. You can find registration information on that at teamfoodsafety.org/2014. So thank you again for joining. Have a good rest of your day, and stay in touch for news of the campaign materials launching. Thank you.
I found the answer to that if there's still time on the line.
Okay, if everybody's still on, Ellie has her kids.
Sorry about that. It's on my blog, and it's the March 2011 story, Kids and Vegetables, A Success Story, March 2011.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks,
Ellie.
guys.